So, you've probably seen the headlines. In early 2026, the Middle East just exploded into a conflict unlike anything we've seen for decades. We're going to break down what's happening right now with the war in Iran, trace back how we even got to this point, and then look at where this all might be headed.
All right, so it all kicked off on February 28th. And when I say it escalated fast, I mean fast. What looked like a targeted strike at first just spiraled into this massive regional firestorm. We're now talking about 14 different nations getting pulled into this thing, either through direct attacks or hitting back in retaliation.
And get a load of this number: 2,250. That's how many bombs and missiles were dropped by U.S. and Israeli forces in just the first 24 hours. This wasn't some warning shot over the bow. No way. This was a full-on, massive, coordinated assault right from the get-go. So what was the point of that opening blitz? Well, the goal was pretty clear. It was a classic decapitation strike, and it worked. The attacks took out Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Just like that, the regime is thrown into absolute chaos. A power vacuum opens up, and you can just imagine the shockwaves that sent across the entire region.
Okay, so this whole campaign has an official name: Operation Epic Fury. So let's ask the obvious question. What were they trying to achieve with such a massive military move?
On paper, the coalition's goals sounded straightforward, right? They said they wanted to neutralize Iran's military, stop their nuclear program, and help bring about regime change. But the reality on the ground, almost immediately, something else entirely. We're talking regional chaos, a huge humanitarian crisis, and the global economy getting thrown into a tailspin. And that's the big question, isn't it? How on earth did we get here? A war this big doesn't just happen overnight. So let's hit rewind for a minute and look at the chain of events that took us from a tense, simmering shadow war to this all-out conflict. It really started to unravel back in 2024. You know, the old rules of fighting through proxies? Yeah, those went out the window. Suddenly we were seeing direct missile strikes. Then in June 2025, we got a preview of what was to come with the 12-day war. Fast forward to January 2026, huge protests erupt inside Iran, and then boom, diplomacy completely collapses. The final door just slams shut. And looking at these two conflicts side by side really tells the story. That 2025 war, that was a limited strike. The goal was pretty surgical: set back Iran's nuclear program. But the 2026 war, Operation Epic Fury, is a whole different ballgame. This is an all-in campaign. The goal isn't just to set something back. It's total military takedown and forcing a change in who's in charge.
So what was the official justification from the U.S.? Well, the White House press secretary put it this way. She said it was because of the cumulative effect of threats, and this is a direct quote, the president's feeling, based on fact, that Iran posed an imminent and direct threat.
But as you can imagine, Iran's leadership saw it very differently. Their deputy foreign minister had a pretty pointed question in response. He basically asked, look, did we show up in the Gulf of Mexico threatening Los Angeles, or did you guys come 6,500 miles to our shores? It's a stark contrast in perspective for sure. All right, so that's how we got here. Now let's jump back to the present day and really unpack the fallout from all this, because the consequences are just cascading across the board, politically, economically, and of course the devastating human cost. Politically, the first thing that happened was a mad scramble for power in Tehran. You know, taking out the supreme leader didn't just remove one person. It completely shattered the entire chain of command for the ruling establishment. So the Constitution says an interim council is supposed to take over. But, behind closed doors, a real power struggle was going on. It all came to a head on March 8th. That's when the Assembly of Experts, and reports say they were under a lot of pressure from the military, the IRGC, elected the late leader's son, Mojtaba Khamenei. This is a huge deal. It's basically a shift to what people are calling a militarized theocracy. And of course, the human cost of this conflict just immediately spilled over the border. On March 2nd, Hezbollah, which had been holding back, jumped in. They launched attacks on Israel, and just like that, a devastating new front in the war opened up in Lebanon. And the result, a full-blown humanitarian catastrophe. We're talking about almost 1 million people in Lebanon displaced from their homes in just a few weeks. Let that sink in. To put that into perspective, that's nearly 19% of the entire country's population, almost 1 in 5 people forced to run for their lives. So let's be absolutely clear, what's happening in Lebanon is a full-scale war. We've got more than 820 people killed,
Israel has boots on the ground with a full invasion, and the Lebanese army, they're basically paralyzed, stuck between a rock and a hard place, terrified that if they make a move, it'll trigger a civil war. Okay, let's switch gears and talk about the global economy, because this war hit a major artery. I'm talking about the Strait of Hormuz, the single most important choke point for oil on the entire planet. And you can see the shock to the system right here. Before the war kicked off, a barrel of Brent crude oil was about 66 bucks. The minute the conflict started, bam, it shot up to $92 a barrel, almost overnight. That's how fast the markets panicked. So why does this matter so much? It's simple. With all the naval attacks and insurance companies pulling out, the strait is pretty much closed for business. And that has stopped about 20% of the world's daily oil supply in its tracks. 20%! We are talking about a massive, massive global energy crisis. And you've got to understand, this isn't just a regional fight anymore. Oh no, Russia and China are involved, and they're providing critical support to Iran. Russia's feeding them satellite images for better targeting, and Chinese companies have been providing targeting data and some seriously advanced tech, like these quantum saturation systems that help coordinate huge drone swarms to overwhelm enemy defenses. So, where does this all go from here? How does it end? Well, analysts are basically looking at 4 main possibilities. And believe me, each one has wildly different consequences for the Middle East and really the whole world. Okay, so here are the 4 scenarios. First, you've got what the coalition says it wants, a total regime collapse, maybe sparked by an uprising from the people. The second possibility is a negotiated capitulation, where the Iranian regime is so beaten down they just accept the terms of surrender. The third is, well, the ugly one, a grinding forever war, just a long, bloody stalemate. And then there's the fourth option, which is by far the most dangerous, state fragmentation. And we need to be really clear about what state fragmentation means, because this is the absolute nightmare scenario. It's the Syria-Libya situation. Central government in Iran completely collapses. The country splinters into different territories run by warlords and militias. And the scariest part, you could lose track of nuclear materials, of missile stockpiles. We're talking about a proliferation crisis on a scale we have never seen before. So that leaves us with this one final, really heavy question. The whole point of Operation Epic Fury was to change the Middle East for good. But as this war just keeps grinding on, you have to wonder, has it actually created a path to a new, better Middle East? Or has it just opened the door to a completely shattered one?